hype. I've talked about it on this channel before. It's something that I just don't get involved with nowadays in the gaming world. Don't get me wrong, I still get excited for games and love playing them. But why should I get frantic about a game that comes out in over a year, gets delayed multiple times in the process, when I can't even keep up with my game list right now? There's too many good games to play right now this year that I haven't gotten to on this channel. But like most things, there's always an exception. For me, that exception is Danganronpa. It's a series that feels so unique, so different from everything else out there, that it shines a beacon of uniqueness in a gaming environment that always seems to mimic the latest crazes. I gave the second game one of the highest scores on this channel to date, and both the first game and the Ultra Girls Despair spin-off rank up there in games that I had a great time with. And now, it's finally time for this series to continue. Danganronpa V3 Killing Harmony comes out on September 26, 2017 in the US for the PlayStation 4, PlayStation Vita, and the PC for $59.99. The game takes elements of Phoenix Wright's court case gameplay and injects it with the storyline of battle royale and overall chaos, and puts its own unique spin on top of things. Its themes hit about the effects of hope versus despair, the cruelty of life, and what happens when you give writers free rein to approach difficult topics, even if it makes you feel really, really uncomfortable. Now, for the purposes of this review, I played the PC version of the game. However, before I begin this critique, a couple of things. First, this copy was obtained from Spike Chunsoft for the purposes of review. Now, that won't change my opinion of the game in the end, but you should know that because of FTC guidelines, as well as the whole morals thing, you know? Secondly, this is a bit of a heads up regarding this review and the format I will be presenting. If you know anything about the Danganronpa series, you may realize the difficulty of this review because of spoilers, especially in the video format. I mean, even the first death is a spoiler itself. And how do I talk about the effectiveness of the class trials, or of the deaths and the emotional toil they take on you, without giving that away? So a couple of things. First, you'll see these spoiler Monokumas pop up on the screen a lot during this review. He's going to hide valuable information, such as possible motives, characters, and hell, even things that aren't spoilers, just so that you don't see a possible pattern to them. I don't want to take away the experience from anyone who's seriously considering getting this game, but I need to provide enough information so a consumer can make an informed decision, and those Monokumas allow me to do that to a certain extent. But even with me covering up those certain elements, people may be smart enough to put two and two together with everything I cover up. I saw that in the second game's review. So, on top of the spoiler Monokumas, footage may be doctored. Now, I would normally be strongly against this, because I don't want to present information that could mislead people. Unfortunately, you'll just have to trust me on this one. During this video, there may be characters on screen, or text on screen, that doesn't necessarily line up with the actual end product of the game. The themes and the tone will still be saved in those scenes, but realize that this is the best way for me to keep you informed without really screwing up your experience. If you have a problem with that, I would go read a text review instead of this video, or just listen to it instead. Okay, sorry for the long intro, but let's get into it. After waiting for so long, will Danganronpa V3 Killing Harmony throw you into the depths of despair, unsure why the game couldn't live up to the series' reputation? Or will this series somehow find a way to take itself to the next level, keeping you captivated with thrilling tales of betrayal, friendship, and a robotic bear with a love for chaos and death? That's what I'm here to find out. Let's start off with the core of what makes the Danganronpa series so interesting: the story. If you haven't played a Danganronpa game before, well, I question your life choices. But here's the gist of things. 16 high school students are trapped within the confines of an academy, forced to live out their daily lives in what ends up being a prison. The self-appointed headmaster, Monokuma, puts them in a deadly game of survival through the killing game, having a bit of backup with giant robots to persuade the students from not just kicking his robotic ass. So what's the survival game? Well, as I mentioned in the intro, think Battle Royale meets Phoenix Wright. As the students go about their daily lives, they may be pressured by Monokuma's different motives to kill one of their classmates. If a murder occurs, the remaining alive students must investigate the death and go to a class trial. If they can figure out who murdered the victim, the killer is punished and executed, and the game continues on. If they can't, however, then the Blackened, aka the murderer, is able to escape the game and is free from the academy and the killing game. Oh, and all those other students that got it wrong? Executed. Now, this is a very simple explanation that only gets to the core of the story. There's several subplots and special details that make the Danganronpa storyline unique. For example, the students here aren't ordinary high school students. They are the ultimates, the best of what society has to offer. This ranges from the ultimate detective to the ultimate pianist, down to the ultimate cosplayer. Each of them bring a unique set of skills to the table that could be used to keep themselves alive, or manipulate the circumstances of the game to their own benefit. Let's talk about the selections of ultimates here, aka the main characters in our story. The characters here hit a good mixture of unique talents and personality trait. You've got the eccentric ultimate eventer Miyu, who's got a bit of a dirty side to her, and plays the line between eccentric genius and insane savant. Then you've got the Neo-Aikido master Tenko, who thinks all men are disgusting, hinting at a very dark past that molded her into the physical powerhouse that she is today. Contrast that with the lovable giant Gonta, who loves bugs and wants to be a proper gentleman for all, but is a little bit on the naive and slow side. What I found really strange from the get-go here is how much I ended up seeing elements of past characters with several of these new ones, but remixed in a way that still gave them their own personality. Let me go back to Gonta, for example. His naive nature with his massive strength reminds me a lot of Icane from the second game, and his kindness reminds me of Oi from the first. But even with those reminders, he didn't feel just like an archetype of any sort with his whole gentleman shtick, and his more proactive nature of things really helped it in comparison to those other two characters. But these connections to the older game actually enhances the experience with each character. But more on that later. What I will say, however, is that unlike some of the other games in the series, some of the more secondary main characters shine a bit more this time around, and actually get a bit more character development. Look, let's face it, in the past games, there were characters that paled in comparison to a set of the other main students. Yashihiro is the prime example of this in my mind. He really doesn't change at all, and that doesn't really help things in a story where you'd be tested to your breaking point. If you don't change at all, well, how do you grow as a character and feel like the story's events actually affected them? He felt like an outsider in that story, and honestly, if he was eliminated, I don't really see any change to the main story plot. Here in V3, however, there's definitely no Yashihiro, as even early game deaths have characters with reasonable development before all is said and done. Which means you actually get more attached to the other characters, and you actually feel something when fate decides to basically screw them over. Okay, I need to move on to the actual storytelling and the main plots and subplots of the game. Danganronpa V3 still follows the basic structures of the games before it. You get a reveal of some information that seemingly helps the students fight back against Monokuma. Monokuma manipulates the situation to cause a motive, and then chaos erupts as a murder happens. The formula really doesn't change at the core here. However, it's about how effective the subplots and the writing is to get the game to pull on your emotional heartstrings. It was clear from the get-go that V3 wasn't messing around and brought its A game to the table writing-wise. The first case is not only the best opening case in the series when it comes to story, it's maybe one of the best cases in the series to date. You know that there's going to be twists and turns when it comes to a mystery plot. That's a core concept of what the genre is about, misdirection and getting you invested in the story. But I admit, this game had me playing into its hands like a puppet, as the several reveals that occurred during the first case caught me off guard and kept me glued to my seat. You'd think by the fourth game in the series, I wouldn't be surprised in what the game was willing to do. Lo and behold, I sat there befuddled, with my jaw agape at what was happening in the first case. Which leads me to my first score enhancer. If you're considering V3 as your first iteration into the series, I have to caution you on that, and really recommend that you play the first two games. Maybe you can skip Ultra Despair Girls, but even then it's a bit worth it. Yes, they have indicated that this plot is a bit more separated from the other plots in the series, that it's more of a self-contained story. With that said, one of the masterful things that this game does is use the setups in the original game to remind you of those moments and scenarios in that game, and then pull specific strings in order to mislead you. You will always be guessing in these scenarios. You'll think that the game is trying to mislead you on something, that it's too similar to a past scenario, therefore they wouldn't do it. And yet it will play out the same way. Then you'll think you've adjusted to it, and that you found a hint on how the story is going to play out, only for it to be completely wrong and the story just went into left field. It ends up going so far that you'll be so unconfident with your own story deductions that even something that seems so painfully obvious ends up being a problem because of how well the game has manipulated you. But oh boy, that's not the only way this game will manipulate you. Let's talk the writing and emotional impact. Danganronpa V3 does a great job of carefully navigating the different characters, motives, and themes with a scalpel, and is then able to use that to weave a story so tightly that you can't be helped by being caught by its lures and traps of interest. That probably didn't make any sense to you. What I mean by this is that it allows for enough room for characters to undergo changes, or for facts to undergo different perceptions, without the main synergy of the story being broken, or the reader to stop believing in this world. The best analogy I can use: think of a dumb horror movie. Think about how many dumb decisions the protagonists make during that movie. While some can shut out those thoughts of, "this makes absolutely no sense," for the sake of visual kills and entertainment, some are going to hate it because those so-called smart, or clever, or interesting characters break perceptions that those viewers had of them. Rarely do you have a situation where not only do the actions of the characters make a lot of sense, but it's still scary as hell and not boring. The Thing is the first movie that pops into my head with that kind of criteria. Now apply that logic to the scenario of V3. Yes, you have characters who range from more evil to good. Naturally, you'd think the good characters wouldn't consider killing, and the evil ones are definitely more willing to. But the thing about fantastic survival stories like V3, it understands that in this type of plot, evil is in the eye of the beholder. If a person can see the circumstances of why a character would commit an evil act, and it be justified based on their past beliefs, is that action necessarily evil anymore? Maybe it was done to fight the perception of evil, or to save someone, or to save a group of people. And once you start to understand everything involved, you can't help but care a lot more about the story. You believe in characters like Miyu, like Kokichi, and what they're going through thanks to this pointed writing. You trust that even if right now the character does something that makes no sense, it will down the line when you get more information. And because the game is one of the best, if not the best, of wrapping prior events and connecting them to recent reveals, you are always getting a payoff for paying attention to this story. What's fascinating is that it does this so well, despite the fact that it hits some really troubling and controversial topics at times that are inherently difficult to understand or teach to an audience. I mean, that's not new for Danganronpa. This is a series that had the implied forced sexual prostitution of a minor in Ultra Despair Girls. But I was still taken aback by some of the story elements here that this game was willing to use as plot devices, and even more impressed that it still made sense without the character being inherently broken at his core. I do give a lot of credit here to NIS America, Spike Chunsoft, and the Danganronpa team for not taking the easy way out with the localization of the game and allowing the writing to have a bit more free reign. At no point did I think that the game had a significant change that changed the context of its core themes that it was going for. Now, for sure, there were elements that were seemingly changed to help the American audience understand certain themes a bit more given their home layout. I mean, there's a direct reference to Donald Trump in here, but unlike other bad localizations, where it would have been jammed in there with peanut butter and 2 slices of bread, this one was carefully crafted and still kept the tone of the scene intact with the visuals I saw, as well as the dialogue that was before and after it. This is a really well-handled localization. With one exception that I honestly laughed my ass off on. Sometimes a good context joke can just work.
A dead body is fine because it's just an object. But if a lip, I think I might cry.
Cry as loud as you want. I'll cry with you. We can spend the night together. In the morning after, I'll write goodbye on your mirror in lipstick before I quietly leave.
Only after you leave do I realize how much you really mean to...
Quit being so gloomy. This is the year of the Jets. Fuck the Patriots.
I'm sitting here and trying to really come up with negatives for the story section of this review. I don't think you can be an effective reviewer if you can't find something that the game can improve on, even a supposed perfect game. Yeah, I have tiny nitpicks here and there, but they don't feel substantial enough. And I admit, Danganronpa's V3 story was everything that I expected and more. 2 of the cases are by far the best in the series without a doubt in my mind, and there's a third one that's, well, fantastic by my point of view, surpassing those 2, but I can see people having a problem with it in its reveal, delivery, and its gimmick. But it was so well built that I really can't hold it against it. I find myself at the edges of despair here, because I'm unable to give you really great prime examples of how great this story is that doesn't spoil the plot itself. I'm basically asking you to trust me, even if I'm giving you good analogies and generic feedback on the plot. Now, I felt the same way during parts of my Danganronpa 2 review, but at least in that case, the game was known to be considered great at the time. I had support behind me. Here, I could technically be wrong. I could be a fanboy that's seeing what he wants to see, regardless of what is in front of me. But what I see is a masterpiece. Moving on, I think both the fans of the series and new players alike will want to hear about the gameplay next. The main storyline gameplay is divided into 3 parts: free time and exploration, investigation time, and the class trial. Let's actually start in the middle here with the investigation section, because it's the direct lead-in to the core class trial gameplay. When a murder happens, you'll have to investigate the crime scene for evidence in a point-and-click type style gameplay. You'll search for evidence in the academy grounds, talk to your classmates to get alibis, and discuss what you've found so far during this time. In essence, what these sections end up doing is giving you a tiny bit of interaction, while still setting up the backstory of the case and the key pieces for the class trial. This section is pretty basic, as you can't leave the room a good amount of the time until you've found all the required evidence, and the game really holds your hand throughout it. Almost too much, in fact. It's not like some of the optional portions and the discussions that you can have don't give you some more clues on how you can get through some of the tougher decisions within the trials. Those are important. It's just, I wish the game expanded this section of gameplay a little bit more in its third iteration. For example, allowing you to pick up 2 pieces of optional evidence that serve to take the place of another piece of evidence. This would allow for other thought processes to shine, and would help the replayability of the game a tiny bit as well. In addition, I wish I had a couple of more red herrings in this section. I know you don't want to waste the player's time per se, but allowing them to go off on a tangent that's plausible, but ultimately wrong, would really make the role-playing as a detective really sink in. Now, by far, this is the worst section of gameplay in my mind, even though it's basically acting as a conduit for the storytelling. I still enjoyed it overall, I just think with a couple of tweaks, it could have been really, really good. After the investigation is done, you all participate in the class trial. The idea is simple. Make your way through the various conversations to help identify the who, the what, the where, the when, and the how of the murder. And the why, of course. You do this in a variety of ways, but the core gameplay loop involves the non-stop debates. Here's the gist. You and your classmates debate back and forth on a certain topic. Certain key phrases will show up during that time in various colors, the most important being yellowish orange and light blue. To take down those phrases, you are given a gun, a truth gun, filled with bullets armed with the evidence you found during your investigation. If you find a contradiction with the yellow and orange phrases with one of the evidence bullets you have, then you load the bullet and shoot the phrase. The same goes for the blue words too, except you shoot them if the bullet supports the phrase. In either case, if you're right, you'll move on to the next section of the trial. If you're wrong, you'll lose influence, aka health, and lose too much health during the trial, and it's game over. Except it isn't, you'll be able to try again right away, but you'll lose points in your overall grade for that case. The logic puzzles this section creates is a good variety of straightforward decisions, thinking problems, and what the hell am I missing gameplay. The game starts off rather easy in these sections to ease you in, of course, but it soon starts to test your grasp of the case while actually testing your reflexes towards the middle and end of the game with some of the extra mechanics such as white noise. It puts you in the role of a lawyer in a high-profile case, and some of the best times in this game is when you struggle to see the solution, only to figure it out after looking through the evidence one more time. Here's the thing too, it also makes sense 98% of the time of what it was trying to get you to present in V3. One of the bigger problems I had with the Phoenix Wright series and some of the older Danganronpa games was that sometimes it felt like the evidence and the way the phrase was, well, phrased, was too much of a stretch at times, while other pieces of evidence made a lot more sense for that situation. V3 felt a lot clearer on those more edge cases, where it made sense that would be the piece of evidence used, thanks to the description of the item being more suited to the phrase, or the picture having that detail show itself a little bit better. Now you'll note that isn't 100%, and to be frank, there will be points where you sit there screaming that this evidence proves it, and that's not the item in question that it wants. In most cases, slowing down, thinking about things again, and trying to simplify your logic will remedy this. In these cases, they don't want you to skip logic steps. Well, more on that later. So even though an item may have proven something less directly, it's probably not going to want that particular one. Thankfully, the game does do a good job of hinting you at the end of a phrase section where you have to cycle back. Almost too much at times, but I'd rather have too much than too little. Although, there was one case that unfortunately caused me a bit of chaos, and it actually came down to a mistake in one of the thumbnails for the piece of evidence. Specifically, something that should have been there wasn't, and that was a big deal considering the case. It wasn't what I was looking for, but it was a bit of a problem considering I spent 20 minutes trying to figure out what I was doing wrong in that case. Now that's not the only thing you'll do during cases. There are other minigames that you'll participate in that'll help keep the variety of the gameplay up. For example, you'll have a sword battling section that you'll go head-to-head with a classmate to cut down their words. You'll have to conclude the case with a comic minigame in putting things in order based on their events. Several of the older games in the series come back, and they serve a good change of pace while still keeping in line with the Trials themes. So what's new to this version? Well, a couple of new games. There's Psych Taxi that replaces the free-running minigame, but is basically the same thing in the end. In here, you collect letters to make a question, you answer the question by driving into the right appropriate person. It's not too difficult, but it is slightly improved from the second game. Then you've got more substantial additions like the Split Opinion, which makes you match phrases in rapid succession when you guys are deadlocked at an opinion. It's more reactive and less thinking than the other ones here, but again, it provides a good change of pace to the gameplay. My favorite here is the Mass Panic Debate, where not only do you have to watch the phrases, you have to silence and focus in on one person while doing it. This actually makes a lot of gameplay sense as everyone's talking at once, and you've got to, hey, focus on that one person. Makes things a bit more difficult, and well, difficulty is something that this game needs in the long run. But with all that said, the biggest mechanic they've added here is one that at first glance, I was a bit concerned about. The lie mechanic. You can take a piece of evidence and flip its meaning around, and attempt to use it as a truth bullet, committing perjury. In certain key points of the game, the only way to make progress is to tell a lie, to force your comrades to dispute it, or to face a hard truth. Now, here's where things get weird. Story-wise, it forces this situation where characters who are being reasonably competent are all of a sudden really stupid, or way too trusting of you if they figure it out. But on the other hand, its first introduction into the game is pretty strong, despite the fact that most of the lie points throughout the game, where you have to lie to make the story progress, is painfully obvious. However, it's the other thing about the mechanic that really works. The ability to skip sections of the trial if a lie is told at the right time, using a back route. These lies aren't as obvious as the more story-based ones. They require real commitment to the case, and realizing truths way down the road before you've even gotten to them. If you get them, they make you feel like a genius when you pull them off, as there's only a couple in a case, if that. It really adds to the replayability of the cases for sure, and makes the mechanic worth it altogether. Finally, let's talk a little bit about the secondary modes and some of the other gameplay beyond the class cases. In the story, you get free time to spend with the other students, and you can level up your relationship to earn new abilities for the class trials and to understand their personality more. Now, if you're concerned that somebody will die before you're able to level them up, don't worry. There's a whole mode unlocked at the end of the game that allows you to pick up that slack. It's again adding to the storytelling and your connections to the characters overall, and it's a good length that keeps the pace of the rest of the game steady. The best way to earn some favor with those characters is giving them presents, and you get those presents through Monokuma coins or the casino. Monokuma coins are earned by destroying things in the environment, solving class cases, and other minor gameplay ways. The casino coins are bought with Monokuma coins, and those you will need to earn more through the various casino games. There's things like simple slots, a version of the Psych Taxi, and my favorite being the block game that I got heavily addicted to. Also, the date tickets for the post-game, where you can date your favorite waifus, yeah, you get them here. In fact, side note, someone who follows this channel specifically asked me for my waifu list for this game. Here it is. Take it for what you will. Finally, it's the more surprising addition to the series that's a little bit strange here. A board game and a dungeon crawling RPG post-game. Yeah, I know that sounds weird for a visual novel, but they sorta work. The board game allows you to take characters from any of the 3 main games in the series, and level them up by hitting certain board pieces and giving them skills and whatnot. The board game is actually rather straightforward, but it's a bit of fun, thanks to the ability for other characters in the series to interact with each other outside their own plots. By leveling them up, that allows you to go into the dungeons and play more of a standard dungeon crawling RPG that you'd see in something like RPG Maker. It's simple yet effective, especially with the want to earn higher level cards so you can get further into the dungeon. Now, it's not special or really tactical, that's for sure, but I found it addicting because it's Danganronpa characters that I've come to know and love. Overall, the gameplay has some nice additions to it, and the core logic and problem solving is addictive in conjunction with the story. I do wish that future iterations take the gameplay to an even further level, as while things like the lie mechanic worked, more branching paths or even more difficult gameplay would be appreciated from this series at this point. Now, let's talk a little bit more of the technical side of things, albeit briefly. Starting with the PC configuration options, the game has a launcher that allows you to set a couple of things. You got full screen, windowed, and borderless windowed mode, and a selections of resolutions up to 4K. That's right, up to 4K. Now, I played in 1080p, as I haven't gotten myself a 4K monitor yet. Anti-aliasing is only available in FXAA or nothing, but that's only going to really affect the more 3D sections of gameplay, which are limited. As for in-game options, you got sound sliders for the music, sound effects, and the voice lines. And a little bit of a recommendation, you may want to turn the music down a little bit. It sometimes overpowered the voice lines, at least at the default settings. You've got options for the text speed and the reticule speed here, with the first being rather nice considering the visual novel portion. For the more action sections of the game, you can adjust the movement of the cursor, invert the X and Y axis, and turn on and off movement bob, which is great for people who may get motion sick. One thing though, Danganronpa team, I have no idea what the difference between the controls of shooter versus Danganronpa is supposed to mean at first glance with this option here. The description should have been a little bit more descriptive for new players. The one big thing that's missing here is bindable keys, especially on the keyboard side of things. I would have hoped that Team Danganronpa would have added this in the game, considering this is one of the first games in the series to release on the PC alongside its PS4 and Vita brethren on the initial release date. But sadly, you can't here, even though the keyboard controls mostly make sense. As for performance, look, it's mostly there. I mean, most of the game's a visual novel or has very simple gameplay mechanics, and it doesn't dip in frame rate in the most critical section, the class trial. The only time I see a dip is when I'm running in the free movement section. Now look, it would be nice if it didn't do that, of course, but it's in a section of the game where speed and fast input isn't really necessary, for the most part anyway. Overall, technically, it does what it needs to for the PC version. I mean, would I want more elements here? Yeah, I would, like bindable keys. But it does the job, and given the game's format, I'm not gonna hold a lot against it. Finally, let's touch a little bit on the presentation here. While the art style is consistent with the older games, Danganronpa V3 has a new look in a couple of areas while still keeping the classic elements of its visual style intact. It's not gonna blow you away from a graphics perspective, not at all. Again, visual novel. But to be frank, it will impress you in a lot of other ways. First, let's hit the character artwork and designs. I love this artwork. Look, I know that it's an anime style, and that's not some people's cup of tea, but it's colorful. It's interesting to look at over a period of time, and the most important thing of all, it's stimulating while still keeping the characters within the same world. Look, there's a lot of different designs here, a lot of different colors, and a lot of different personalities, and yet at no point did I think these characters were from different game worlds like some other games that try this type of diversity. The designs also tell you a lot about a character just by its look alone. Let's take Miu here. Notice her neck and the barbed wire type necklace she's wearing. It implies that she's a bit prickly, which does a great job of characterizing her main personality and the way she treats people. The straps on her stomach, legs, and arms help to characterize her masochistic nature, feeling pleasure in being inflicted pain by people putting her down verbally. Sure, there's more obvious symbolism here, like the goggles which every inventor type seemingly has, but it's the combination of all these elements that are easy to see, but define each character rather nicely in a visual manner. Every visual cue here is purposeful, and the biggest overlooked example of this has to be the character's eyes. When you first look at them, you may be off-put by how weird they seem. Hell, when I saw them for the first time, they felt so unnatural. However, it's actually rather clever in its implementation. The faint white circle in the middle ends up giving a new detail that can be used to show a character's emotional state. Take Suichi here doing push-ups. Note how in this scene, that white line is a lot thicker than normal. What it ends up doing is giving his eyes a degree of determination, that he's manning up, and that he's strengthened his resolve, all through that one little circle. The removal of the circle can indicate doubt or a lack of resolve, like Maki here as she questions the situation around her. There are also times in the game where the eyes will go, well, haywire, and I encourage anyone who plays this game to pay really close attention to them. You really get a lot of secondary storytelling out of this small detail, like all other small details when it comes to character models. However, that's for the more 2D sections of the presentation. There are 3D sections as well, which aren't as good. They happen in specific cutscenes, and frankly, I wonder why. The 2D sections are really nice, especially the executions, which I can't show here because, you know, spoilers. The 3D, however, feels blocky and loses a segment of that style that the other sections have. They feel lifeless compared to the others. As for the environments, it's really a mixed bag when it comes to style, which usually would be points against the game due to its inconsistency. However, the Danganronpa series is a bit different, because it's purposeful in its execution here. Certain elements are supposed to have more attention drawn to them, especially in the investigation gameplay, or hell, even in the story itself. Look at this classroom, and realize how different the styles are between the desks and the barbed wire windows. And yet there's a reason for that. It wants you to see the windows when you first look at the room. It wants to make it clear that this is a cage. Now, you may point out how hypocritical it is for me to say that the characters feeling of the same world, and it being a positive is when I point out the lack of uniformity of the environment, and saying that is also a strength. But that's why context and purpose is always important when it comes to the presentation. With the characters, for example, the presentation staying uniform is more important, given the themes of the game about coming together as a group and overcoming this challenge as a whole. They have to be together, and the presentation helps that. On the other hand, the environment being chaotic and sort of this mishmash of things also works. It implies this place is barely holding together. It's almost like it's bandaged up with these out of left field assets that don't seem to fit the environment. But that's the point. You can see that in the other games as well, but it is so much more evident in Danganronpa V3. And it really feels like the art director upped his game when it came to symbolism in this third installment. Beyond symbolism though, the biggest upgrade to the presentation has to be the UI. My god, it's so much better than the last two games. The angles that it uses helps give the text and the characters a cleaner definition. This ends up complementing the cutout forms of the characters, as well as the mishmash of comics and visual novel style. Everything is sleek with the use of angles and non-conformity, along with a color scheme that quickly identifies a character or the situation at hand. The small touches of animation when text appears or a portrait appears gives the game more of a cinematic type approach, without it feeling like it's losing its style in the process. I know what you're thinking. How can a UI in a visual novel make that much of a difference? Well, go and watch a segment of my Danganronpa 2 review, and you'll understand exactly why. In the new one, there's less screen space used, while keeping the information presented consistent with the older game. Whoever designed this UI, well frickin' done. Let's move on to the voice acting. You can choose either the Japanese or English voice acting, and I'm going to be honest here. Both of them work rather well here on their own. There's no voice in the English cast that feels out of place for that character, even if one of the voices felt like chalk on a cardboard for me. But to be fair, that voice was supposed to be a bit annoying, so it got the job done. It's clear that they picked a wide variety of talent who knew how to get into their special roles, and you can feel the emotion with several of these performances. It's the ramp up and the inflection that is the key here. The actors did a great job of giving you those more subtle emotions through their work, as you can tell a person is getting more panicked or is losing their mind with what is going on. Now, are there standout performances? Yes, Kokichi, voiced by Derek Stephen Prince, is an unbelievable performance of how he's able to range his emotions and work toward a natural progression with the character that he's acting. The range here is fantastic, and I have to say, I may look at other games he's been in just from the performance here alone. That's saying something. I don't think that's the only good English one that stands out. Gonta, Maki, Kaede, they all do a great job, and even the ones that don't hit that fantastic level are still very, very good. Now, this shouldn't be a surprise. A lot of the voice actors here have worked in the series before on both the Japanese and English side of things. Honestly, in which ones to use for your playthrough if you pick up the game, it's going to come down to your own preference. I love Kokichi's English version a lot more than the Japanese for his character, but I also find Tenko's Japanese voice actor a bit better for her character. Unlike a good amount of Japanese games, where it's clear that the Japanese talent is a lot better, here, both sides are on par with each other, and it's going to come down to your natural language and how comfortable you feel with it. Just take a listen to hear what I'm talking about.
Upsy daisy.
So easily? His strength must be due to my magic. Yup, there's no mistaking it. Oh, you're amazing, Himiko!
What should Gonta do with cover now?
Please leave it somewhere else. Be careful not to hit anyone with it.
Actually, Gonta no can do that. Very rude to litter.
Why do you guys hate lies that much? There's only one truth, but endless possibilities for lies, you know? And some of them are only white lies, or lies to be kind to people. If you deny all of that just because it's a lie, then that means you guys are just terrible at being lied to! Seriously, the worst!
まずは落ち着きましょう。こういう時はおかしですよ。押さない、かけない、喋らない。
喋らないと話し合いになりません。
進め方なんて気にする必要ないわ。これは普通の裁判とは違うんだから。容疑者も弁護士も検事も裁判員も。
As for sound, it's more complimentary here. Again, I feel like I've said this a bunch of times during this review, but it's a visual novel. It's not the star here, but it does do a good job of complementing everything around it. The small tone and sound changes with changing text can help sell the moment or the new emotion it's going for. It's not overpowering either. It's more of an exclamation point rather than its own sentence. It won't blow you away, that's for sure, but it's nice to have. Take a listen and hear what I'm talking about.
You guys ready? Right now, on the threshold of an amazing adventure. Showtime. That's right. One.
Hey.
Two.
As for music, I love the Danganronpa soundtrack as a whole, and I have to say, I love a lot of the new pieces here, even the vocal ones that are in the middle of the actual gameplay. Now, that's a personal thing on that one. I don't like hearing voices in story segments on top of the voice acting. With that said, there was a track or two here that really worked in setting the mood with the Mono Kids, and they had voices in them. Like I've said time and time again in this review, the music matches the segment it's complementing rather well, and enhances it rather than be the star. The best pieces are the ones that directly inflict dread on you. They get to your heart and make it beat a tiny bit faster in a horror movie atmosphere, without having a jump scare at the end of it like a dick. And of course, you've got the iconic Danganronpa theme music, which in my opinion, is one of the best theme songs out there. But take a listen and hear what I'm talking about.
Whoa. Now that I'm up here, this is pretty high. It's kind of scary.
Do you want to switch?
Nah, I'm fine. By the way, can you see my, delicates?
Sorry.
Sorry. Huh? So you did see them. There we go. Huh. The grate came off pretty easily.
What? Why? But I'm Kaito Momota, Luminary of the Stars!
Whoa! That was so awesome!
Winning at something like this isn't anything to brag about.
Hey, do you have some...
Nothing like that. Just got a knack for...
What? What is it? Yes.
Overall, the presentation has been upped in this installment across the board, while still understanding that it's not the star of the show, just one of the lead actors. Yes, it has faults, but those faults don't drag the game down at all, at least in my opinion, except for the 3D stuff. Other than that, more visual novels and games of this type could really learn from V3. That's for sure. In the end, Danganronpa V3 is a rare gem. It's not only a game that I was looking forward to and was actually hyped about for once, but it was a game that lived up to its hype. It's not the pinnacle of gameplay here, not at all, even though several of the additions in the after modes and the trial gameplay improved on the base case system, which is still solid. The presentation is still lovely to look at, despite some 3D sections that are still meh to say the least. But the story is why you would pick up this game, and it's some of the most interesting storytelling that I've seen in games to date. V3 not only lives up to the high expectations of the plots before, it surpasses them in several ways thanks to some really good characters and the right amount of intrigue and restraint in certain parts. And that ending. Oh boy, that ending. With all things considered, Danganronpa V3 Killing Harmony ties Persona 5 for the position of highest scored game on this channel to date, coming in at a 98 out of 100. That means it's a day one buy, even if you're hurting for cash. But like always, that's only a base score. There's too many different gamers out there with different tastes and needs for that score to be useful by itself, at least in my opinion. That's why I use an enhancer system. Enhancers are the more subjective taste or elements of games that could make you want to avoid or get a game if you fall into their category. Here's the list of them for Danganronpa V3. If you fall strongly into the category of the enhancer, add or subtract the score from the base score for that enhancer. If the first digit of your base score changes, look in the description for the new buyability rating for the game. Needless to say, I'm pretty much going to recommend this game even for the most extreme cases of enhancers, because, well, V3 does a lot of things right. One other thing. If you're looking to pick up the PS4 or Vita version of the game and would like to support the channel while doing it, I would recommend using the affiliate links below for Play Asia. They are a gaming and anime website that you can pick up the latest and greatest in Japanese games, imports, and various other items surrounding both worlds. I am a partner affiliate with them, and I do have a promo code here for you to get dollars off your purchase with the link below, which will financially help the channel. If you don't though, that's cool. Just pick up the game. At least if the review score said that you should pick up the game. It's fantastic though. Now, I'm not going to ask you to do what most YouTubers do at this point, but I will ask for one thing in particular. In order for me to become a better creator, I need people to point out the strengths and weaknesses of my review style. So, if you have a chance, leave your feedback on this review in the comments section below, so I can become a better creator and learn from those comments, and then earn those subs and views like the bigger creators get. As for what's coming up on the channel, I'll be focusing on some smaller indie games such as Mini Ghost and recommendation by users, as well as continuing work on the game design videos as I mentioned in the past fan vote. I may take a week off or so just to reset, because in order to hit this embargo, I did do a lot of late nights. But whenever the next video is, I will see you next time. And as always, keep on gaming.